Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Have you ever sat down on a Sunday afternoon with a good book and read and thought, "God, that character's a bit like me, isn't it?" And then as you've read further into it, you thought that character's very much like me. And as you read further and further, you said, "Hang on a minute, that is so like me that it's so uncanny." And yet this book was written a couple of hundred years ago. That can't possibly be true. Well, that seems to have happened to my guest today. He has, or believes, that he is the husband of Mary Shelley. In other words, he is the reincarnation of Percy Shelley. Does that sound too fanciful for you? Well, let's find out. His name is Crispin, and he joins me now. Hello, Crispin.
Hello, Richard. Thank you for that fascinating introduction.
Well, I hope it's reasonably accurate because that's, I think, what we're going to be talking about is the soul coming back into different bodies and being able to identify somebody who is predominantly famous, as Percy Shelley was,
Hmm.
and a tragic life or a tragic ending to him. Um, but
Hmm.
but what a fascinating thought. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but perhaps you can convince me. So, is the premise correct that you think that in the past life you were, in fact, Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley's husband?
Yes, indeed. Absolutely correct.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. Maybe we can find out how you got to that thought process. Where did all this start then?
Well, it started, believe it or not, with a trip to Switzerland in around 1993, where I was invited to spend 10 days at a flat in Switzerland in a lovely little town called Schaffhausen, just north of Zurich. And I met a girl at this flat via the language student that I was seeing at the time from Bournemouth, who was staying in Bournemouth, sorry, to learn English, who had invited me to Switzerland to meet her friend Miriam. And when I got there, I was blessed to spend 10 days with these two lovely Swiss girls. Um, of which, like I say, one was completely unable to speak English. This girl, Miriam, was stunningly beautiful, incredibly high intellect and charisma, this striking bright orange hair. And literally, and she spent 10 days gesticulating to me because she was unable to speak English. And I did my best to try and speak back to her. And then my stay came to an end. And incidentally, actually, just before I left, on the morning I left, she woke up this whole block of flats that I was staying in, singing to the at the top of her voice to one of her favorite songs on the radio. This is at 5:30 in the morning. So
Oh, blimey.
on the day before I left, in a big block of flats, literally, she struck up full voice, and she had the most powerful, beautiful singing voice. And I woke up in bed in this room, literally bewildered, with the whole flat just bursting with this music at 5:30 in the morning. And I asked my friend, "What's going on?" She said, "Oh, it's me. She does this every morning."
Good
And
heavens.
I was like, well. Well, I went home, and 10 days later, it was about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, the girl I was saying, Lorraine, had come to England. This is from Switzerland by this point, leaving her friend Miriam alone in the flat on her own. This is around the winter months of January. And by our understanding, Miriam had taken a bath in one of these old baths that unfortunately emitted carbon monoxide into the flat because it was just a very cheap, very basic sort of flat where unfortunately the heater emitted carbon monoxide into the building. There was a reason for that that I won't go into, but long story short, very unfortunately, Miriam had a very high dose of carbon monoxide and died. So this was about 2 weeks after I left Switzerland, and the phone rang, like I say, with this dreadful phone call to tell us that all of a sudden Miriam was dead. and had been found, I believe, on her bed, unconscious, and somebody that was quite literally one of the most lively, intelligent um, people I'd ever met in my life, in terms of just so full of life, so bursting with intelligence, and this sort of fearless charisma that she had,
Yes.
that was absolutely just completely blew me away in terms of
And
um
she's gone.
yeah, and or yeah, into suddenly she's gone. And it was so shocking that um my girlfriend's dad at the time jumped on a plane and came straight to England that same moment. He literally, as he heard what had happened, he thought, he just couldn't understand anything, and he just jumped on a plane, and so he suddenly arrives all wearing black, and sits in my living room for a whole week smoking himself to death. And sadly, that what happened is we had a week of mourning. Literally, three of us sat in a room. It was me, Lorraine, and Lorraine's father Armin, and we all smoked far too much
Yes.
in this sort of period of bereavement. And um, this later, unfortunately, translated into cancer problems for two people. In other words, one bereavement almost ended up in a lot of other bereavements
Oh my
because,
goodness.
yes, because literally, Armin sat there, he smoked so much, he gave himself stomach cancer. A few years later, he came down with, which I was able to link and connect together to this, to Miriam passing. And a couple of years later, I came down with sinus cancer. And I was also able to connect that to that week of mourning. So this should go out as a message to your viewers that when somebody dies, do not go and sit in a room for a week and smoke yourself into the same position as the person you're mourning. So
No.
yeah, so that imprinted in my head a set of circumstances in terms of, we had a 19-year-old girl with bright orange hair, uh, who had invited me to attend, or at least was part of a 10-day stay in Switzerland, who had all of a sudden died in the most tragic of circumstances. And the fact she had died is what imprinted all these facts into my head. The fact she was 19, she had bright orange hair, she was completely fearless, she was a librarian, incidentally. This was one strange detail that was given to me when I arrived in Switzerland, that didn't quite match with her personality, because she
Right.
seemed so outgoing and fearless. I thought,
Can't imagine her being
yeah,
quiet
I thought,
in a library.
I know. I was like, I looked at my girlfriend at the time. I thought, are you winding me up? Yeah. She looks like someone who should be on a stage in the middle of some kind of rock concert, not in a library. But yes, that was the details that was given to me, and like I say, imprinted, tattooed into my mind, that made very little sense in terms of keeping this sort of atmosphere of mystery and unanswered questions that only seemed to grow larger as time went by,
Right.
until incidentally, I was invited to a meeting at it is November 2017 at St. Peter's Church in Bournemouth, uh, which was all about Frankenstein, and a Frankenstein themed evening in time for the 200th anniversary of its publication on the 1st of January 1818. So, in other
And
words,
we should just say to those that may not know, I'm sure most people do, that Mary Shelley, and we mentioned her at the beginning, she is the author of Frankenstein, of course, the very famous book.
absolutely, absolutely. So it was then that all of a sudden, um, I was encouraged to look a little bit closer at the Frankenstein book, at all the features and details of its creation, and suddenly realized that it was literally like putting two pictures of dots. I've got this here for you. It's like dots on a piece of paper, like that.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Yeah.
that was imprinted into my head, and then another piece, and I was able to put these two pieces together, and they matched exactly. In terms of, Mary Shelley was 19 years old on the 1st of January 1818 when the book was published. I did a little bit more searching, find out she had bright orange hair, just like Miriam in Switzerland. She was a bookist, not quite a librarian, but fascinated with books. She had this fearless personality. that was absolutely notorious in terms of just not giving a damn about what anybody thought about her, you know, or anyone trying to intimidate her into any or manipulate her. And the next thing that happened in light of all this was I all of a sudden found signs and evidence of my date of birth encrypted into the text of the Frankenstein book on the first line of the chapter 8, when it says, "Cursed, cursed creator, why did I live? Why in this moment did I not extinguish this spark of existence that you so wantonly bestowed on me? I know not." So in other words, why I haven't killed myself in light of all the horrific abuses you've put me through, I really honestly can't tell you. And in that first line, she put three C's, C, C, C. And it just so happens that incidentally, Miriam was fascinated with Greece. Now, this is another thing. This is the sixth thing I'm counting here. On the second hand now, Miriam fascinated with Greece. Mary Shelley fascinated with Greece. She wrote a Greek diaries publication where she published all the details of her investigations into Greek mythology, Greek literature, and she even visited Greece and went on little adventures there that she wrote about in her diaries. And
Right.
similarly, Miriam took Lorraine to Greece on a little adventure prior to my actually going to Switzerland. So all these things were stacking up and up and up and up and up to the ceiling at this point in
Right.
terms of like so many matching details from 200 years ago to today, you know, just over and over again. And um, the was it? Yeah, the last one, the Greek connection, was important, of course, because that is what I believe encouraged Mary Shelley to look closer at the Greek Bible, because incidentally, the original Bible was written in Greek. Before it was translated into English and other languages. And that Greek language, incidentally, governed it was an alphabet that was both dictated numbers and letters. It was an alphabet that did two jobs at the same time, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
In light of the fact they had no numbers, they hadn't got as far as actually writing down numbers. They used A for one, B for two, C for three. So the alphabet did two jobs. And in that is, as they wrote the Bible with that pretext, then the letter C was used to denote the number 6. So when it came to the verse 18, chapter 13, saying, "Here is wisdom. Let him who hath understanding count the number of the beast." That number was counted using letters because they had no numbers there at the
Yes.
time, you know, and that's why now the original translation from the Greek Bible is the King James Version into English. And that one uses letters to write the numbers. When you look at that King James Version, it says in written letters 600, 6, meaning 666. Whereas in the other versions, they start to use numbers again and cheat. But point here is that I found when I picked up Frankenstein and I looked in there, I saw those C's and I realized, hang on a minute, this is matching, this is looking very, very similar to my date of birth. And I then had a look in
So,
the Greek Bible to find them using the letters.
when when was your date of birth then? If
And my date was 6th of June, 1967.
Right.
So that's 666. And when I looked in the Greek Bible, I suddenly found, oh, look, it's a letter C that they used
Right.
in that verse. So she obviously lifted that from there, or I would say obviously, but highly likely, and put that into Frankenstein. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Curse, curse creator. And maybe, just maybe, the man, and as she was doing this, I believe she was thinking in her head, there's a high possibility that a man will be born on the 6th of June, 1967, who will pick up my book in 200 years' time and find it. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
You know, I mean, yes, you know, and when and she was absolutely right. It is exactly what happened. I found it. And as I found it, I was able also to suddenly realize that the storyline matched the altercation between myself and my father exactly. And I mean, it
so
described.
So is this? I mean, because when you emailed me, you were telling me that it was the another book that she wrote called The Last Man, in which your personality was described so clearly that
Yes.
you then started to make this connection between you and the last man, and the last man being Percy Shelley, whom she married.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's when I had to, because once I found out all that information in Frankenstein, then I thought, well, how can I verify this? How can I
Mm.
thought I need to look at something else to verify what I've just discovered, because what I just discovered I thought was absolutely, and I'm still sure today, is absolutely monumental. So I thought there's two places I can look: The Last Man and the Bible. It's just the next two logical places to look in a situation like that. And I was quite limited with choices actually at that.
Yes, I mean, before we discover that, I mean, if you were looking at these things, did it not occur to you? And I'm just putting this out there to find out really, that it was a series of coincidences that possibly anybody could, not anybody, but few people could, but might come across coincidence. Oh, that's my birthday, and what would make you feel that you were in fact a person written into the story, even if it's coded or reincarnated? How would that? I'm just thinking if I read that stuff, I'd think, wow, that's really interesting, but maybe it would be a jump too far to start.
Well, this is where the premise, what happened prior to it, is so important, because
Right.
everything has a foundation, and the foundation to it was this Frankenstein discovery. And the Frankenstein discovery was so clear in terms of I was identified as the monster in that book. So I was identified in one book before I was identified in the second book. And it was the
Yes.
first identification that came up sort of, at least in my mind, 100% accurate, that then led me to realize that the second one was 100% accurate. And I say this because it identified me as the monster in the story. And my background is extremely traumatized in terms of being hit by a car, surviving cancer, losing over half my teeth. We got this
Oh
terrible
gosh.
sort of dental kind of problem. I do feel like the monster. I do have
Right.
features of the monster from the book. And if you look at my dad's situation, he is identical to the doctor described in the book. And the altercation between myself and my father is described in extraordinary accuracy, in an undeniable fashion in that book. And so then I looked, that's when I opened up The Last Man and I started looking at things. And then I started to realize, well, how, I mean, then yes, she's talking about my personality in all this incredible detail. And then I had to sit down and think, well, hold on a second, perhaps, just perhaps, this lady I met, in 1993 in this flat, is the reincarnation of Mary Shelley. And just perhaps, she is fully aware as a reincarnating soul that her book is on its 200th anniversary, and I am a character inside that book, and she literally came to visit me for 10 days just to give me gesticulate and give me like a little bit of encouragement, and then disappeared behind the scenes again.
And
Uh,
there was no connection with her and the book at that time. She didn't sort of give you a copy of Frankenstein and say, "Ah, have a read of
no,
this." No.
no, absolutely not. And I felt that there was something in the air when I was there, but I wasn't able to actually put my finger on what it was. And, of course, until years after the event. But in terms of the accuracy, yes, I mean, I was absolutely stunned by the kind of the way she was talking about my character in terms of,
Mm.
well, I am quite a unique personality, and it's not really possible for anyone to write about me in at length, in a book, for over hundreds of pages, without sort of knowing me very well. And I did sort of sense this. So yes, I went on a bit sort of more of an investigation, uh, and was
So I
able.
mean, do you feel then that you have the qualities or the any remembrances of Percy Shelley?
Well, oddly enough, I mean, I do have flashbacks, funnily enough. And by my understanding, we are all reincarnated souls.
Right.
Mm, and the process of reincarnation works in a very particular way. In terms of nature, is very careful to completely erase all memories of your previous lifetime. Sorry. Uh,
It's
uh,
Mary Shelley on the phone. Excuse me. Just
yeah. Hopefully not. Um, yes, the nature is very careful to erase all memories of a previous lifetime, not just the previous one, but possibly hundreds of previous lifetimes. Because, of
yeah.
course, if we had any memories of them, or there was any kind of cross filter, we would never be able to sort out the problems in this present lifetime. We'd be so.
No, it'd be so
Um,
confusing. Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
yeah, and I do suffer a little bit from these in terms of actually, as I've gone into this territory of being able to identify myself in a previous lifetime with a huge amount of evidence. And all I can say at this stage is that the amount of evidence has been so colossal, so accurate, so robust, so continuous in terms of its accumulation that it's been impossible to deny. Literally,
Mm.
from me, in terms of I've been surrounded by so much evidence, it's got to the point where I was literally doing my best to deny it. I didn't really want to turn around and admit all these things, but it got to the point where I couldn't actually deny it anymore.
Right.
It was
So,
so.
I mean, I imagine that there may well be people watching this or not watching this, but going about their lives as people do, who this is also not the same story, but that they may have recognized traits or that they've read something and gone, hold on a second, that's me. So that more people have done this than we actually know. That whilst you've managed to sort of identify that you may well have been Percy Shelley, somebody watching this may think actually I was a Roman soldier or I was this, and have flashbacks to various things, as people often say they do.
Mm,
So what do you think is going on then? Because I know that you described yourself as a spiritualist to me before we started recording.
mm.
So we are spirits that reincarnate all the time. Explain how this works. It's obviously you've gone into and studied all of this.
It's a very important feature of it, and I spent many, many years of my life studying this. And it came to my understanding very quickly that there are ancient civilizations that existed on this earth that had extremely profound and advanced understanding of how the principles of light affect the functioning of our mind. And in so doing, I believe they were far more advanced human beings, quite simply by their knowledge of themselves.
Right.
That translated into a knowledge of life and a knowledge of themselves that elevated them to a much higher state of wisdom and understanding than we exist in today, which is comparatively in complete darkness.
Yes.
I
Well,
mean,
we seem to have gone backwards then.
yeah, we
What?
have literally, quite literally gone backwards, and quite radically so when you look at the evidence. In terms of, yes, um, they made just simple observations in terms of, well, we all dream at night, and those dreams obviously are a form of projection where we're projecting a lot of stuff onto a screen and assimilating it and digesting it. Similarly, during the day, we project as well in terms of, well, everything I look at, I color in through my previous experiences, etc. So they used all that to compare um, features of light projection, like, for example, um, no two human beings are the same. We are all completely unique. We all look very similar when we're born, and we start to look similar again before we die. And these are all features of a rainbow as you turn a crystal very slowly, babies and baby rainbows are born on one side of the screen. They reach their prime when the differences are most exaggerated. Then as they grow older, all the differences start to dissolve, and they look similar again before they die. And ancient people realize, hold on, maybe we can use this as a little mini universe gifted to us by nature to understand more about our human mind. And of course, then they gave them the possibility to put a rainbow over a person. Say, well, if there are so many similarities between a rainbow and a person, we'll put a rainbow over a person. And they came up with 7 chakras: red, orange, yellow, green, the middle one, 3 above the heart, 3 above, 3 below. So red, orange, green, blue, indigo, violet. And the Thai Buddha, incidentally, has a protrusion out of the top of its head. If you go to Thailand, you find the Thai Buddhas have this protrusion. It's like the crown chakra is protruded like this, like a sort of, yeah, just out of the top of the head. And this signifies enlightenment in terms of like this bridge between, it's like a rainbow bridge that the ancient people used to connect the spiritual world to the material realm. And this was often depicted with a snake and kundalini that connected the basic ground and earth chakra to as through the 7 spirals and 7 steps, to the crown chakra. And that's when they started thinking about reincarnation and realized that the soul very likely goes through hundreds of reincarnations in order to transcend these various levels to the crown chakra, where it finally no longer requires any necessity to reincarnate itself and is actually freed from the wheel of birth and death and what the Indians call samsara. And this is only happens through hundreds and hundreds of reincarnations. And when we've gathered all the right knowledge and that knowledge, incidentally, is knowledge of mind. That knowledge is knowledge of the human mind. Once it becomes to the point you no longer need to reincarnate yourself, and that's a very ancient understanding. And the Buddha incidentally used a rose or a lotus growing in the lake to show how that process grows, how the lotus flower grows from the bottom of the lake in cold, black, murky water at the bottom in darkness, where literally souls will suicide themselves, not realizing that there's any light in their life at all. But as the soul grows and as it pushes its way upwards, bits of light start to shine through the water, and eventually the soul will burst through and this huge flower opens and the pollen is released to the wind. And that's how Buddha tried to explain the path of the soul, the journey of the soul to enlightenment. And I mean, it goes further and further and deeper in terms of, well, ancient astrologers were able to find out what stage your soul was at in terms of astrology and all the star signs like Gemini, Aquarius, Sagittarius. So you may be born under Sagittarius one lifetime. You'll learn those lessons of a Sagittarian in that lifetime. The next lifetime may be Gemini. And that Ayurvedic astrologer would be able to look into your your old lifetimes and also predict future ones in terms of the astrological impact of that process. So yeah, I mean, the understanding today of this is practically zero.
So what's happened? I mean, that's the thing. If we were much more advanced and we were able to know all of this, you would have thought that the trajectory, if I can say the word, is upwards. But it does seem that somehow or other we've plummeted down to almost animalistic qualities again, where we're bashing each other, having wars. We seem to be incredibly dumb. People aren't reading. They're suckered into all the materialistic world. They're not having deep spiritual experiences or intellectual conversations, or moving out of the sort of more animalistic, beast-like situation, being attracted, as we can see on the telly, to these events that have demons and beasts and all of that, and not pushing back against it. So what do you think's happened to us?
Well, there's a very simple answer to that question, Richard.
Oh, good.
Yes, in terms of, we just touched upon it with this rainbow analogy in terms of,
Yes.
well, yes, ancient people compared a rainbow to a human being. And as they did that, and as they identified the chakras, this identified our connection to a source. And
Right.
that source was not, that source was permanent, it was eternal. It's what unifies us. It's what, so in other words, on the screen here, we are separate. There are two halves on the screen in front of us, but at the source, you and I are one. There is,
Right.
once you get deeper and deeper and deeper, you get ultimately to a place where there's no more difference between us at all. And
Right.
in that place, there's no beginning of time, there's no end of time. And the ancient people called it stainless, they called it eternal, they called it untouchable. No one can get to them. They say there's no word that can even touch it. All you can do is point to it. But as you begin to understand that place, you are empowered. And that
Mm.
empowerment is the greatest fear of every government on the earth. If they suddenly, because that realization that and it is a one-way valve. It's like once you realize it, you cannot unrealize it. Once you realize your connection to this eternal, powerful source, and realize that nothing can touch you, that what's on the screen is coming and going, and it will always come and go. But at your source, nothing can kill you. Then you become powerful in a way that governments don't like.
Mm.
So all this kind of thinking, all this kind of philosophy was stamped out by governments, I believe, with an extremely ruthless determination that even involved quite possibly the genocide of millions of people, in order to just stamp it out as a threat, as a problem that they just simply did not want or like or tolerate.
It,
And because
it,
the point, it's infectious. Once I'm
mm.
enlightened, once I realize my source, I'm contagious. I can go around spreading it to other people,
Yes.
and that's their worst nightmare come true.
And yet they are of the same source, and yet they're not, for some reason, they're not recognizing it. They're not wanting to progress themselves then, or they want
No.
to progress and stop other people, which would be an oxymoron, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And the unfortunate thing there is that they, of course, they found a way of making money out of this process. They realize that when people are enlightened, it's very difficult to manipulate them and make money out of them. So then they become just a sort of something
But
that's
don't they want to do the journey themselves?
well, I don't believe they did. At some
Or are they just at a base level, they don't understand it and do not comprehend what you really mean and what it is to be connected to the source and everything else? And so they just think, well, we're stuck here. We're going to make money from these idiots that seem to think that they've got something, maybe they're much baser than us, but they've had the advantage of power and
Well,
using
yes. I mean,
use.
there's a process that certainly, well, one Indian philosopher told me about, and that seemed extremely relevant, and that is souls in the early stage of their growth, which I believe is the sort of souls you're just referring to at this point, are absolutely obsessed with what's on the screen. They just seem to
Right,
be completely hypnotized and mesmerized by what's on the screen in terms of dazzled by money, completely distracted by material wealth, to the point where they will do anything to get it. They're so mesmerized by the glitter and the glory,
I
and
see. Yes,
the prospect of, I don't know, happiness that they think will come with it, that they chase it to the detriment of everything else. And that everything else is what you've just talked about.
right,
And this process will go on ultimately for lifetimes until it reaches a crisis point, until eventually that soul has an enormous breakdown where they suddenly realize they've spent lifetimes chasing an illusion that's burnt them out and quite literally destroyed them from the inside out, to the point where they are totally and utterly broken. And at that point, they lift their head up, probably in tears, or probably, I don't know at what point, and then they're open finally to what we've just been talking about, to the possibility of maybe a source, to the possibility of more to life than just chasing all this stuff on the horizon in the hope that, and of course, all part of that breakdown was because they collected all this stuff and realized, and no, none of the
And
happiness
realize
they
that
thought,
happiness
none
isn't
of it
that.
actually came. You know, so
Yes, and I suppose you can see that you can see their philosophy in the materialistic world through the advertising and the way they upgrade everything and going, yeah, buy this now and
yeah.
you'll be happy, and then you buy it and they go, aha, you're not really happy, are you? Because you need to buy this now,
Oh yeah.
and all of this continue, and you realize very quickly, or at least you would hope that you realize very quickly, that actually there is no end to this buying this upgraded car, this upgraded phone, this washing machine, whatever it is, to try and keep up with the Jones. That happiness is not down that route at all.
It's not, and psychologists have experimented with this since just after the war, I think. I don't know, it was Hitler or the Americans employed some of Hitler's psychologists to study this very subject. How can we target people with just repeated improvements, repeated, they had these stockings, they had all this stuff for women and makeup and all these new things that were going to roll out. And they just wanted to find out what it was in the human mind that led us to keep buying and keep, repurchasing all this stuff, even though we didn't need it or even wanted
Yes.
it.
No,
So yeah,
exactly.
that's been something that's been exploited to the nth degree for the last sort of 70 years.
I mean, if anybody is even slightly enlightened, I think that people can see that the last 100 years of, well, the Industrial Revolution, but ramped up over the last 100 years, and particularly the last 50 years when adverts were on the telly and all of this, that we can see that the rapid upgrading and selling of something slightly better, a phone that can do a little bit, 1 gig more than the last. Oh, I must have that. I mean, it's an experiment that perhaps was worth doing and proved actually happiness isn't there. We can take that conclusion. We can say, let's not bother with that experiment anymore because that is over.
mm,
It would seem to me. But to go back then to Mary Shelley's husband, I mean, what's the reaction from people as you tell them about this and you broach this subject? Because people must sometimes think it's a step too far.
Well, I can perfectly understand that. And to be honest, I've got to the point where that's what I expect. I mean, I wouldn't really expect anyone to have a different reaction.
Mm.
I mean, I try to put myself in their shoes, and if somebody just turned around to me and said, oh yes, I think I'm, Percy Shelley
Yes.
in a previous lifetime,
Or
I
I'm
would.
Shakespeare, or I'm,
I
Tennyson,
mean,
or whoever.
yes. I mean, without looking at the evidence, it does look slightly nonsensical. I can appreciate that. But all I can remind your viewers is that I have evidence stacked to the ceiling, and I am an extremely inquisitive person. I'm a very doubtful person as well. And I have personally put it to the test in 1,000 different ways over the last, since its discovery in 2017 or 2018. I have been testing every single fact, feature, and facet of it, an aspect, literally with a hammer, banging it just to see, is there, am I going mad? Is there anything about this that I've misinterpreted or not got right, or maybe made a little mistake over? And the more I've done it, the more I've knocked it, the more I've gone around the whole thing, the more I've realized it's all true. It's all 100% true. And then I'm put in this position. Well, how do I take all this evidence and present it to somebody and to show them I'm not mad? And
Have
that
you done any regressions and things like that under hypnosis or any of that sort of stuff?
Well, no, no, not actually, not actually. Well, funny enough, I mean, I'll let a secret out. I'll let a small secret out. When I was young, when I was a teenager, I did experiment slightly, with mind-altering substances, and one of those was LSD, and I did a particularly high dose with some travelers once. And I had a flash during that. I had a flashback to a scene. This was in London, actually, in the 1800s. I was literally in a carriage, and I could see the gas lights and everything. But that's the only time I've had a flashback to a previous lifetime. Was under the influence, unfortunately, of a rather high dose of mind-altering chemicals. But since then, it's not been a thing. Yes.
Have you felt inclination to write poetry or things like that?
I
Or have
am
you
a
been to places that Shelley had been to that you've gone, I know this place, but I can't explain it?
I think probably that does. I think that probably does happen, although it's quite hard for me to identify um, certain things or certain features. But I am constantly finding things, constantly reading things that every day, quite literally on a daily basis, I'm seeing more evidence, more clues, more things to confirm that everything I've found is right.
Mm,
And I mean, incidentally, I mean, this little piece of writing out of the necessity of atheism that I found that kind of identifies all this science of light that I was talking about, or we were talking about earlier. Percy Shelley talks, about our coming and going, about our arrival and our disappearance from this planet, and he does speak in this oldie worldy English about the fact that words themselves cannot describe, or rather, they're not effective enough to effectively describe the nature of our source and the unified, powerful, eternal nature of what unites us at our source. And he talks about that in very fluent detail with this on this necessity of atheism in such a fashion I was able to match it with similar sound bites that I come out with today. And it just,
right.
yeah, and this is just one example of thousands, that I've discovered that put me in a position where it was literally undeniable. And yeah,
I suppose, I mean, just jumping back to the overall theme of what we're talking about, even if nobody believes you, which of course nobody's entitled to do, entitled
exactly.
to do, but it doesn't. But what you're saying is something glorious to a lot of people who will accept this. That
Mm,
actually it doesn't matter what happens to us in this material. We go on. We should
yeah.
not be fearful of these idiots in power and what have you. I mean, I was watching something earlier today, and the guy said, you can chop my arm off, but I'm still here. You can chop the other arm off, I'm still here. Chop my head off, but I still exist.
Yes.
That's only a material thing.
Yes.
In other words, they cannot reach you
Mm,
because actually, as you said yourself, we're all the same thing. So,
absolutely. Absolutely, and the Indians put that in a way in their poetry. They wrote little verses about this subject, which were beautiful. And one of them said that when you understand this, you are released from the mouth, from the jaws of death. The simple or in sort of similar words that
yes.
this great mouth, that comes to devour all people. Suddenly, you are released from that phenomenon.
And that's the fear that they like to have you in, that, if you don't take certain medical interventions and things, you're likely to
Precisely.
get ill and die. But if you realize actually all that's doing is it's just like leaving this coat behind and putting another one on,
That's
which is,
exactly what they said. Funny enough, in the Bhagwan Gita, which I think was something the Hindus wrote, they said that um, I think that a man changes his trousers when they become threadbare. Similarly, the soul changes a body
yeah,
when it becomes old. And they said this should not sound strange to a sane man. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
it
you know what I
sounds
mean?
if
Yeah,
it sounds strange to you, ladies and gentlemen,
yeah.
then clearly you're not sane.
Yeah. I mean, and yes, so the human race rolls on.
Absolutely. Well, it's an absolutely fascinating story, and I guess, would you say that there was a reason that you found this out, or this was shown to you? Is it that you share this so that other people do become fearless about death or about reincarnation, or are just open to the idea,
Well,
or
well,
is it a
certainly.
complete fluke
Well,
that you
certainly. I
discovered it?
mean, I believe what we have here is an extraordinary privilege, a golden opportunity for other people to learn more about their soul, learn more about their previous reincarnations, and quite literally apply everything I've said to their own life. Because quite simply, what's happened here is just one human being who's been able to exemplify, demonstrate this process using evidence. And I've been gifted, I believe, with a huge downpour of evidence that literally, like I say, has made it got to the point where it's utterly undeniable now for me to deny what's happening and what, you know. But now other people, like I say, yeah, can look at this and realize, well, hold on, this also applies to me, because we are all reincarnating souls. We all have left evidence of previous incarnations in on the planet in various forms. Like, for example, Mary Shelley, I believe, yes, wrote Frankenstein. And it's almost as if she knows as a soul that was reaching its 200th anniversary in 200 years' time. And boom, she's right there, right on time in Switzerland, just as she was 200 years ago, ready for the 200th anniversary of her book that she wrote. So that just shows that, you know, there's got to be hundreds of people out there who are working on projects from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, like pushing a cart. You know, they push that cart a little bit in one lifetime, then they take a break and they come back and they push the cart, that same cart that there was there in the previous, a little bit further down the road. And that's all that's happening here in this story with Mary Shelley and Miriam. She's reincarnated herself to push her book a little bit further down the road. And that last push has ended up in a small miracle, I believe, in what's happening quite literally here in terms of, yes, this is a world first. It's never happened before in human history, which I think is, by definition, yes, absolutely extraordinary. And
do you think Miriam herself knew that she was the reincarnation, or is she just acting? What would be the word? She's just acting as she wanted
I've asked myself many questions about Miriam. I mean, incidentally, one more feature about Miriam, is she cried a lot. Funny, although she was full of life, and this also helped me link her to Mary Shelley, because Mary Shelley suffered a lot of bereavement in her life. But Miriam, yes, I often ask myself, how much did she know? Because she looked like she knew a lot when I met her. She had eyes so full of life, and there was something dancing in her eyes, as if like, I mean, it was like she was reaching out to scream at me. Yet she couldn't speak a word of English, so she's gesticulating frantically. And
I mean, that's really fascinating for somebody who at 19 must have had an incredible command of English to write Frankenstein and subsequent books, you know, in a previous life. I mean, that is quite remarkable. And then you see these young 5-year-olds playing concertos on a piano, and you just think, where have they got that knowledge from? In a few, I mean, how many years would it take somebody to start from scratch? And yet a 5-6-year-old is doing it, and their comprehension of life and their brain hasn't developed. So it does make you very suspicious that it must have been in a previous life they had studied something, and almost by a fluke, I suppose, that they've tapped into it and can play. You know, not only can they understand the music, but their hands can manipulate the keys effortlessly, and they can interpret the music, and they can read the note. And you just think, how is that possible for a 6-7-year-old?
I do exactly the same, Richard. I sit there and scratch my head, and I am as suspicious as you are, if not more so, that yes, they were doing exactly that in a previous lifetime, not just one, but probably many. Yeah,
Yes.
and that somehow has been passed on down. So yes, there is a distinct possibility, yes, that is ultimately exactly what's happening, and could explain what you've just so eloquently explained.
And so that is, that gives us all hope. I would think, and your story there, and the fact that then we can't be got at really. We can be got at in this lifetime, but if you lose the fear and go, oh well, it's just an old baggy pair of clothes, it's just a skin and bone, I don't need to worry about it, because I'll be back.
Yes.
I'll be back.
Yes, you said that perfectly.
Yes.
Arnold Schwarzenegger would be impressed. Yeah.
Maybe Crispin, it's been a fascinating conversation. I think people will be absolutely curious to find that, and I will be curious to find out if other people have looked at books or seen characters in history or had certain flashbacks, and have done that before. In my past, I must confess that I did do a bit of hypnosis with people, and I did have a chap who did say that he was a Frenchman. He didn't know French. He was what? We were about 16, something like that, 16 to 20. I can't exactly remember. And under hypnosis, he spoke fluent French, but he didn't know French. And of course, I was somewhat blown away, but I didn't know what to do with it as a 15, 16-year-old saying, but when I hypnotized Marcus, he can speak French. And
when you're saying he couldn't speak a word when he was awake?
No, I mean, he had French classes like the rest of us at school, but it was like je m'appelle Richard, it was like real basic, and yet he could go yes, under hypnosis, and I thought, but he's tapping into something, whether it was a past life or not, I don't know, or whether it was just tapping into some, the Akashic record or whatever they call it, who knows. But at the time I was too ignorant to understand, and because we didn't have the internet, so I couldn't sort of go searching for stuff, and there was none of this in the library that I could access. And so I let it pass. But now, of course, in all this in stuff that I talk about and some of the spiritualism stuff that I've been reading and things, you just go, oh yeah, that was really interesting. So now, I do look back and I think, well, was he a Frenchman in a past life? You've shared your story. It seems so more likely than not.
It does to me as well. It does to me. And as you sort of touched upon, I think the possibility that there are other people out there in similar positions to me is extremely high. Yes, there are other people who quite possibly have been written about in other books under a pseudonym. In terms of, the author did just include them in a book under a different name. So it is by no means just a lone example at all. And the possibility, like I say, of there being dozens, if not hundreds of similar examples is very high. And the fact that maybe mine has broken some new ground means that they can now walk in behind me over this new path that I've trod. And we could, over the next few years, see an extraordinary accumulation of similar evidence and similar people on this same subject, piling up to the point where, again, it's just completely undeniable. Thank you, Richard, for making this possible and making history, because I think that's nothing short of what we've done today. And yes, I'm extremely.
Well, I'm grateful to you coming forward with your story. Now, have you got a link to a website or a blog or something that we can send people to look at, or is that not?
I do have the Rainbow Remedy blog, which I think would be extremely helpful for people to look at. It's something I wrote over many years that started as a website. It started as a Rainbow Remedy website that was costing me a small amount every year when I wasn't actually making anything on it. So I took the website down, took all the information and just published it in a blog. So I can I can email the link to the blog, or
yes, I think you have in the past, actually. If I
it's actually in the email, the previous life email, I think.
Right.
I've got that previous lifetime email. If you have a look down there at the bottom.
So the next question is, will you be writing a book about this?
Well, I'm not sure. I think, arguably I've already written the book. That was it. But I would actually, you've inspired me to make a video about this, because as you suggest, as people hear this story, their first reaction, their first thought, which is, quite understandable, is, the guy's either mad or he's just making it up. So what I've decided to do during this interview is make it my own little personal video, like a 10-minute video, where I can include all this evidence that I was discussing. And just put it out there. So as people doubt me, I could say, well, look, there's a link to the video, watch that, and then come back and tell me what you think.
Yeah. Sounds a great idea.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Oh, well done. That's fantastic. Well, when you've got it done, send me the link and I'll put it back. I'll put it in this video for future people to check it out.
Yes. And that will give me something to do for the rest of the day, won't it?
There you go. Well, Crispin, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you. And I think it will have got little grey cells going in lots of people's minds, whether for or against or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's opening people's mind, which is what these conversations are all about.
Absolutely. I think, it's very important what you're projecting here, in terms of everybody has a right to make their own decisions and their own free will to determine whether something is true or not. And that, I think, is critically important and should be a foundational principle before we begin any of these
Yes.
processes. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for pointing that out, because I think that's what makes this as good as it is, and as powerful and meaningful as it is. So yeah.
So if people want to find out a little bit more, The Last Man by Mary Shelley is a good read, is it? I haven't read it myself.
Well, as a book, I mean, it's extraordinary because there are many facets of it. I mean, just very briefly, as a book, when I started reading it in 2018, what I didn't expect is a lot of the features of that story to suddenly start coming through in 2020 when this airborne virus suddenly took off. And actually, the whole storyline of that book, The Last Man, is about an airborne virus that takes off from China, incidentally, in the book. It starts in China and spreads over the course of over the earth. And she's talking about these ruined cities in China. And as I'm reading this in January 2020, I was, yes, literally blown away by how.
That is very interesting. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
realise
yeah.
that. I shall
I mean,
have to get myself a copy and have a
yeah.
read.
Yeah, and she writes, by the way, it's a lot more mature. When she wrote Frankenstein, she was literally only 16. And
Wow.
there are, even though she's a very intelligent woman, you could see certain elements of the immaturity in, I mean, understandably.
Well, how many 16-year-olds today could write Frankenstein?
Well, precisely, exactly. And of course, there's the level of difference in standard, and the maturity of her writing is really quite, noticeable. In terms of and it's a beautiful read, and I recommend anybody to go out and buy a copy. It really is mesmerizing. Her skills are unprecedented. Yeah,
Brilliant. That's on my next book purchase then. Thank you very much. Crispin, it's been a joy to talk to you. Thank you for joining me. Must end the podcast now, but there you are, ladies and gentlemen. What do you make of that? Comments in the comment box, please. I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests. But until then, from Crispin and myself, thank you so much for watching. Till next time.
Thank you very much, Richard.